Reality star Vince Panaro hospitalized after serious car accident. It has been months since the Big Brother 27 house closed its doors, yet the story of those who once lived inside its walls never really ended. Among them, one name had quietly stayed in the hearts of fans: Vince Panaro. He wasn't the loudest voice in the room, nor the most strategic player, but there was something in his simplicity, a calmness that made people trust him. Inside the Big Brother house, he was the one who listened when others argued, the one who stood by his friends when things fell apart. When the show ended, he left not as a celebrity, but as a man who had touched lives simply by being real. Outside the game, Vince returned to a quieter life. No flashing lights, no cameras. He spoke to his family often, reconnected with old friends, and kept in touch with a few of his castmates. Ashley Hollis, the winner, once said in an interview that Vince was the kind of person who never needed a spotlight to shine. And she was right. In the days following the finale, Vince often shared glimpses of his normal days on social media. Cooking breakfast, taking long drives, sometimes just writing about peace and healing. Fans loved it. They saw in him something genuine, something human. The person who reminded them that reality TV could still show real hearts. But that calm, ordinary life shattered in one quiet morning. It was early, the kind of dawn that paints the world silver and soft. Vince had planned to visit his parents that day. A simple family trip that should have been nothing more than routine. He had texted his mom just a few minutes before leaving home. "I'll be there by 10. Don't make too much breakfast, you know I never finish it." It was the kind of small, ordinary message that families exchange every day, never knowing it could be the last. The roads were wet. The city was waking up slowly under a pale sky. Vince drove with the windows half open, music playing softly, a playlist full of old songs that made him think of better days. He always liked to drive alone, to clear his head, to think. Maybe that's why the silence after the crash felt so haunting later, because Vince was a man who found peace in the road, not danger. Somewhere near the interstate, it happened. A sudden noise. A flash of metal. A truck, sliding across the wet highway, spinning out of control. Witnesses said everything happened too fast, a blur of rain, headlights, and chaos. When the sound stopped, all that remained was stillness, broken glass, and the faint echo of a song still playing from a shattered phone. No one could believe it at first. Not the people who had driven past moments earlier, not the fans who had followed his journey, and certainly not the friends who once called him brother. In that single moment, the man who once filled a house with warmth and quiet strength was gone from the world's noise, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than words. News travels fast, but grief moves slower. When the first whispers started spreading online, no one wanted to believe them. It began with a single post, a blurry photo of the accident scene, a caption too vague to make sense. But then the name appeared. Vince Panaro. At first, the fans thought it was a mistake, some rumor made up by strangers seeking attention. But within hours, reality began to set in. Local news confirmed the crash, and the world that had once watched him smile on live television suddenly went still. Ashley Hollis was the first from the Big Brother 27 family to see it. She had been at home, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, when her phone began to buzz again and again. Text after text. Missed calls. And then one message from Morgan. "Ash, did you see what happened to Vince?" For a few minutes she couldn't breathe. Her fingers shook as she searched for any sign that it wasn't real. But there it was, photos of the wrecked car, the headline with his name. She read it again and again, hoping that somehow her eyes were lying. Ashley dropped her phone and just sat there. The world outside her window blurred as tears filled her eyes. She remembered his laugh, the way he used to joke in the house, the way he'd tell her not to take the game too seriously. In her mind, he was still that calm presence, the one who never raised his voice, who never stopped believing that people could be kind. Even inside a game built on betrayal. Morgan Pope found out a little later. She was in her car when her manager called, her voice trembling on the other end. Morgan didn't say a word for a long time. She just pulled over on the side of the road and cried. To her, Vince wasn't just another contestant. He was the one who comforted her after her worst night in the house, when the pressure had almost broken her. He was the one who told her, "You're stronger than you think, kid." And now that voice was gone. One by one, the rest of the cast began to learn. Keanu, Ava, Lauren, all waking up to the same unthinkable news. Some posted tributes right away. Others stayed silent, too heartbroken to type a single word. The Big Brother family group chat, once full of memes and late-night jokes, suddenly turned into a space of grief. Messages came in slowly. Is it true? Someone tell me it's not real. I just talked to him last week. No one knew what to say. There were no right words. Only memories. The sound of his laughter echoing through a house they once called home. As the hours passed, fans began flooding social media with photos and videos. Clips of Vince smiling, cooking, comforting others. Moments that now felt like pieces of something sacred. People who had never met him wrote about how his kindness reached through the screen. And the world started to understand. He wasn't just another TV contestant. He was a reminder that in a game built on deception, there could still be light. That night, the Big Brother 27 family stayed awake, connected through silence and sorrow. No one slept. No one could. Because somewhere out there, the one who had always kept them grounded was gone. And the world felt colder without him. The days that followed felt unreal. Like the world had slowed down but never stopped hurting. The Big Brother 27 family, once scattered across cities and states, began to move toward one place. The small town where Vince Panaro had lived. No one called it a reunion. It wasn't meant to be one. But somehow, they all knew they needed to be there. Not for cameras, not for fans, but for him. Ashley was the first to arrive. She didn't speak much. She just stood near the small church where Vince's family had arranged a quiet memorial. It was peaceful, the kind of peace he would have loved. No press, no lights, just people who knew him, people who missed him. Morgan showed up next. Her eyes were swollen, but her voice was steady when she spoke to Ashley. They didn't hug right away, they just looked at each other. And in that silence, all the words they couldn't say were already understood. Then finally they held on tight. Ava came too, her hands trembling, holding a bunch of wildflowers she had picked from a field nearby. She said Vince once told her that flowers don't need to be perfect to be beautiful. So she didn't buy any. She brought the imperfect ones, because they felt more like him. Keanu arrived quietly. He wasn't the kind to cry in public, but that day, he didn't hide it. He had always said that Vince was the moral compass of their house. The one who kept the chaos from swallowing everyone whole. Now that compass was gone, and he didn't know how to find north anymore. Inside the church, the air was heavy with memories. A few pictures of Vince sat on a small table near the front, smiling, laughing, cooking. Someone had placed a note beside them that read, "You didn't win the game, but you won all of us." As the group sat together, memories began to spill out naturally. Ashley talked about the night Vince stayed up to make sure everyone ate something before eviction day. Morgan remembered his advice. Don't play scared. Life's too short for that. Ava whispered how he used to hum songs when the house got too quiet. Every story brought both laughter and tears. It was strange, how grief and love could sit in the same room and not fight each other. They cried. Then they laughed. Then they cried again. For a while, it felt like they were back in that house. Not the Big Brother house, but something more real, more fragile. A place built not by walls, but by the memories of a man who somehow made them all feel seen. When the service ended, no one rushed to leave. They stayed, sitting together under the fading light, listening to the sound of the wind outside. It was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like Vince was still there, somewhere in the silence, somewhere in the peace. Ashley looked at the sky before leaving. She whispered softly, "You kept your promise, Vince. You said you'd make us family, and you did." The others stood beside her, saying nothing, but their hearts spoke louder than words ever could. Weeks passed, but the world didn't feel the same anymore. For the Big Brother 27 family, every day carried a quiet shadow, a space where Vince used to be. They went back to their lives, but somehow, everything felt slower, softer, almost like the universe itself had lowered its voice in respect. Ashley tried to return to normal, interviews, podcasts, fan events, but something inside her had shifted. Every question about the game now felt meaningless. She no longer cared who had lied, who had betrayed, who had won. Because after Vince's death, She understood something she never did before. The game had ended long ago, but the real lessons were only just beginning. At night, she often found herself scrolling through old messages. Vince's texts, full of dry humor, random emojis, and those small words that suddenly meant everything now. One message read, "You're too serious sometimes, Ash. Smile more. The world's already heavy." She smiled through tears, whispering to herself, "I'm trying, Vince. I really am." Morgan started volunteering at a local shelter. She said she wanted to do something that felt real, something that Vince would have been proud of. She told people that the accident had changed the way she looked at life, that fame wasn't worth much if you didn't use it for good. Sometimes she'd post pictures of sunsets with the caption, "Still listening for your voice." Fans understood. They always did. Ava went back to painting. But her art changed too. The colors were softer now, full of light and shadow. She said she was painting the silence that Vince left behind. Her work became famous online. People said they could feel something when they looked at her canvases, like grief and hope living side by side. Keanu started a podcast, not about strategy or Big Brother, but about kindness. He called it The Vince Effect. Every episode, he told stories about ordinary people doing small, good things. He said, "It's not about being perfect. It's about being present." That's what Vince taught me. Even the fans changed. They created pages and groups not just to talk about the show, but to share memories of kindness, small gestures inspired by him. One fan wrote, "I never met Vince Panaro, but because of him, I said sorry to my mom after years. He reminded me that life's too short to stay angry." Slowly, the world began to heal. Not by forgetting, but by remembering differently. Every tribute, every story, every tear turned into something more, something gentle, something alive. Months later, on what would have been his birthday, the Big Brother 27 family met again. No cameras, no publicity, just them. They drove to the same bridge where the accident happened, carrying flowers and silence. They stood side by side, letting the wind brush against their faces. No one spoke. No one needed to. Ashley took a small piece of paper and placed it under the railing. It said, "You changed the game, Vince, not by winning, but by teaching us how to care." They stayed there for a long time, watching the sun set, feeling like maybe, just maybe, he was watching too. And in that fading light, they realized something profound. Vince wasn't gone. He was still there, in the kindness they showed, in the friendships they rebuilt, in the love they learned to hold a little tighter. Sometimes, it takes losing someone to remember how to live. And for the Big Brother 27 family, that was Vince's final gift. Time has a way of softening the edges of pain, but it never erases what mattered. For the Big Brother 27 family, Vince's absence became something they learned to carry. Not like a wound, but like a scar that reminded them they once loved deeply. A year passed. Seasons changed. The world moved forward, but every now and then, one of them would feel that quiet pull, that familiar ache that whispered his name. Ashley had started a foundation in Vince's memory. It was small, run out of her hometown, focused on road safety and mental health. Two things she said he would have cared about most. At the launch, she stood before a small crowd, her voice trembling but steady. "He was more than a reality show contestant," she said softly. "He was proof that being kind isn't weakness. It's courage." Morgan was there too, sitting in the front row, tears glimmering in her eyes. When Ashley finished speaking, she looked up at the banner behind her, the Vince Panaro Foundation, and smiled through her tears. It felt right. It felt like him. After the event, they all met again. Ashley, Morgan, Keanu, Ava, Lauren. The ones who had once lived under the same roof, fighting for a prize they barely remember now. But this time, there was no competition. No game. No walls. Just people who had become family through both joy and heartbreak. They talked for hours. About life. About healing. About how strange it felt that the show that once divided them had now bound them together forever. When the night grew quiet, they drove to a small hill outside the city. It was Vince's favorite spot, the one he used to talk about during late nights in the Big Brother house. He once said, "If I ever disappear from this world, just look for the quiet places. That's where I'll be." So they did. They stood there together, under a wide sky filled with stars, the air cool and still. Ava set down a small lantern and lit it. The flame flickered softly in the wind, delicate but alive. "For Vince," Keanu whispered. "For Vince." They all repeated. No one cried this time. The grief had turned into something gentler, a kind of peace that felt almost sacred. It was as if the stars themselves had drawn a circle around them, keeping him close, even in absence. Before leaving, Ashley looked out at the horizon, her voice quiet but certain. "He didn't just change us," she said. "He reminded us what it means to really live, to forgive, to love without fear." They stood there for a long moment, letting the wind carry those words into the night. And as the lantern drifted upward, glowing softly against the dark sky, it felt like Vince was right there. Not in the distance, but in every breath of light, every heartbeat, every promise to be better. Because some people don't fade when they're gone. They live on, in kindness, in courage, in the way they make others remember what truly matters. And for the Big Brother 27 family, Vince Panaro would always be that light. Forever part of their story. Forever part of their hearts. Months later, life had begun to find its rhythm again. Not because anyone forgot, but because grief had slowly learned to live beside them. Ashley had moved closer to her parents. She started teaching art again, pouring her pain into colors and shapes that somehow said everything words couldn't. On her studio wall, there hung a single photo. Vince smiling at the Big Brother house, holding a mug of coffee and laughing at something no one remembered. She'd look at that picture every morning before she started painting. Morgan had begun to write. Her blog, once filled with updates about her post-show life, had turned into something much deeper. Letters she would never send, thoughts she would never say out loud. One of her most read posts was titled "The Kindness That Stayed." In it she wrote, "The world knew him for a few weeks. We knew him for a lifetime." Keanu still struggled sometimes. He blamed himself for not calling that morning, for not warning Vince about the rain. But with time he understood, some moments are just meant to happen, and no one gets to rewrite them. What mattered was how they remembered, how they carried him forward. Every year on the day of the accident, they gathered, not to mourn, but to celebrate. They met at the same hill, bringing flowers, stories, and laughter. Sometimes they even brought a speaker and played his favorite songs, letting the music float into the night. The first time they did it, Ashley said something that stayed with all of them. "We can't bring him back, but we can keep him alive by being the kind of people he believed in." And somehow, that's what they all became. Better, softer, stronger. The world never truly knew what they had lost, but that was okay, because they did. And in quiet moments, when the wind brushed past or the rain fell gently on empty roads, they felt him there, not gone, just changed, like a whisper woven into the rhythm of their lives. Sometimes, when the night grew still, Morgan would text the group chat, "Miss him tonight." And without fail, replies would come, "Me too. Always." For Vince. Then silence. But it wasn't the kind of silence that hurt anymore. It was the kind that feels like peace. The kind that means love never really leaves. It just learns to stay quietly. Because even after everything, one truth remained. Vince Panaro's story didn't end on that rainy bridge. It lived on, in them, in every act of kindness, in every second chance life offered. And maybe that's what forever really means. The world had long moved on. The noise of television shows, new seasons, new faces, it all faded into the background. But for those who had truly known him, time didn't erase anything. It only made the silence louder, and the memories sharper. Ashley still remembered that morning, the day Vince's accident changed everything. It had started like any other day. She had texted him, "You okay?" The message was never read. And somehow, even now, she never deleted it. It stayed there, frozen in time, a reminder of a moment that could never be undone. Every year since then, she found herself standing at that same bridge. The one where the rain had fallen, soft and endless, like tears from the sky. The road had been repaired, new railings installed, traffic lights brighter. But to her, it would never just be a road. It was where she lost a piece of her heart. She placed a small bouquet of white lilies by the guardrail. Her fingers trembled as she whispered, "You were supposed to make it home." The wind was cold that day, brushing her hair across her face. But she didn't move. She stood still, eyes closed, letting the sound of the river below fill the silence. Morgan arrived a few minutes later. No words, just quiet understanding. They didn't talk about the show anymore. They didn't talk about fame or cameras or moments edited for the world to see. All of that was gone. What stayed was real, friendship, love, and the grief that connected them. Keanu joined them soon after, his voice breaking as he said, "He would have hated us crying like this." Ashley smiled faintly through her tears. "Then let's not cry. Let's thank him instead." They held hands. Three people who had once been part of something the world watched, but never truly understood. And together, they whispered, "Thank you, Vince. For your kindness. For your heart. For reminding us what it means to love." The sky above them began to glow faintly with sunset. Golden light spilled across the bridge, washing over their faces like a gentle goodbye. In that moment, it didn't feel like the end. It felt like Vince was still there, in the wind, in the warmth, in the way their hearts beat in unison. It felt like he never left at all. Later that night, when Ashley looked at the stars, she thought she saw one flicker a little brighter. And deep inside, she knew, some people are too full of light to ever truly fade. Maybe that's what love does. It keeps them alive. Not in pictures. Not in fame. But in the quiet places where we whisper their name. For Vince, she said softly. Always. And somewhere, far beyond the noise of the world, the stars seemed to whisper back, "I'm still here."